Welcome to this course entitled Human Skills, an Introduction to the Art and Science of Self-Awareness, Leadership, and Creativity. Well, you might wonder why we have chosen these three skills in particular. According to the World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs report and a global study performed by LinkedIn, where thousands of leaders were surveyed around the world, we can clearly see that creativity, leadership, as well as cognitive and emotional skills are the skills companies need most in 2020. In each one of these modules, we will start first with why, then what, and then how we can develop these skills effectively. We will see how these three skills contribute in achieving our conceptions of happiness and success. According to the research-based international bestseller Solve for Happy by Mo Gaudet, who was former Chief Business Officer of Google X, we could define happiness as a state of deep satisfaction with the present, without sadness about the past, nor anxiety about the future. The book proposes a formula for happiness where it states that our degree of happiness is greater or equal to our perception of the events of our lives minus our expectations of how life should behave. The Gallup organization also conducted a global survey to understand the main dimensions of well-being and happiness. The first dimension is physical well-being, and it is related to the energy that we need to perform our daily activities, which is a function of the quality of our nutrition, sleep, and sport. Social well-being, which is based on, our loving relationships. Career well-being, related to job satisfaction. Financial well-being, which is based on the way we manage our economic life. And finally, community well-being, based on our sense of belonging and contribution to our community. All these 5 dimensions contribute in achieving our psychological well-being. Success is about reaching or exceeding our personal, family, professional, and financial goals. Obviously, the quality of our life depends on the quality of the decisions we make every day. So we need to develop smart decision-making principles for all the aspects of our lives. This is probably the best book on this topic. The book is entitled Principles by Ray Dalio, who was the founder of the world's largest hedge fund, where he explains how he managed to construct his decision-making principles for both business and life. This capacity to analyze situations and make smart decisions is commonly called wisdom. Aristotle, the great Greek philosopher, said, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom." So what exactly should we know about ourselves? This will be the topic of our first module. The 2 books we recommend on these topics are SelfAwareness by Harvard Business Review, which is part of the Emotional Intelligence series, and the second book, Insight by Dr. Tasha Urich. This book offers a free self-assessment, and you have the link over there, where you can explore how you perceive yourself and how others perceive you. Self-awareness is about understanding our mind processes, essentially how our thoughts are connected to our emotions and behavior. Disney and Pixar's movie Inside Out is a great illustration of how emotions struggle to gain control over our behavior. We will explore together 8 dimensions of self-awareness. We will first start by describing how our cognitive, emotional, behavioral system works, then the role of our beliefs and values, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the Big 5 personality assessment by Carl Jung, our talents through the StrengthsFinder assessment by Gallup, our chronotype, which is linked to our sleep patterns, our motivations, and finally, how to discover our passions. So let's start by describing how our cognitive emotional behavioral system works. As a systems engineer, I've always wondered if it was possible to model our mind processes and mainly the system that connects our thoughts to our emotions and behavior. There are three important parts of the brain that are involved in how we think, feel, and act. The first part is called the reptilian brain, which is the instinctual or dinosaur brain. The second one is the limbic brain, which is the emotional feeling brain. And the third part is the neocortex, or the rational or thinking brain. There is also a group of neurons called the amygdala, which is involved in triggering our nervous and hormonal reactions to danger. So, after spending several years studying cognitive behavioral psychology, emotional intelligence, neurosciences, social psychology, and critical thinking, I have designed a new mind model that I wish could help people understand in an easy and visual way how this inner system works. The first building block of our mind model is called sensory perceptions. The second is fast interpretation, or how we give a quick meaning to what we perceive. The third one is emotions. The fourth is slow reasoning. And the fifth is behavior. So to illustrate our mind model, let's imagine the following situation. So one day you're walking in the forest and suddenly a big bear appears in front of you. So as an adult, for sure, you will have the fight, flight, or freeze reaction to this danger. But how about if you remove you from the scene and put a 2 years old baby in your place? That would essentially perceive the same situation, but would have a different reaction. So the baby might eventually laugh, thinking that this big bear is just another big toy, another big teddy bear that he's used to play with. So we have a situation where our two characters experience exactly the same scene with their five senses, but have two different reactions. So how could we explain this difference? Well, the difference happens in the fast interpretation stage, where we give a quick meaning to what we perceive. So in the case of our adult character, he adopted the fight, flight, or freeze reaction to protect himself because he knows through either experience or acquiring knowledge somewhere that bears can be harmful and can kill him, whereas the baby hasn't yet developed such beliefs. So, depending on the meaning we give to our sensory perceptions, different kinds of emotions will be triggered. So, if we interpret some situation as a danger, the emotion of fear will be triggered. If we give the meaning of pleasure, then it's the emotion of desire. Frustration, it's the emotion of anger. Gain, it's joy. And loss is the emotion of sadness. And all these emotions, natural emotions, have a use in protecting and helping develop human life. Because without these emotions, human life might end because we can't protect ourselves. We can't be attracted to good things in life. We wouldn't react to situations of injustice or frustration and confront them. We wouldn't be happy for gaining good things or even sad to losing some other important things in our lives. Many people are scared when they are asked to speak in public. So, what happens exactly in this situation and how can emotional intelligence help? In fact, we are anxious because we have interpreted this situation as a threat to something valuable to us, our reputation, our social status, our career progression, etc. We can regulate our fear by changing our interpretation of this situation. So moving from an interpretation of danger, that this situation can, threaten all these aspects that we have mentioned, to a situation of opportunity where we can deliver and share something valuable with an audience, and can be seen as an act of generosity and not trying really to impress this audience with our knowledge or skills or whatever. The fourth part of our mind model is called slow reasoning. It is worth noticing that the previous stages of our mind model are triggered extremely fast, and that has an explanation. Because if there is a danger, we need to react in a fraction of a second, and this fraction of a second could save our life. The slow reasoning process usually starts with questions such as, what's going on? What should I do? Then we can imagine different kind of scenarios. So, what are my options in this situation? We then perform a kind of cost, benefit, and risk analysis depending on our previous experiences and beliefs. So we explore questions such as what will I gain? What will I lose? What's the risk here? Some kind of rationalizations might happen or justification of our actions. So let's suppose we are tempted by some kind of unethical action. We can convince ourselves that it's not that bad, that a lot of people do this kind of stuff. We're not going to get caught. And finally, the character strength is or defines our ability to resist temptations or pressures to act in ways that are incompatible with our values, for example. All these steps lead to our final stage, which is behavior. So in a situation of danger, we tend to skip this phase of slow reasoning and quickly adopt the fight, flight, or freeze reactions. It is worth reminding that this process is not linear. It's in fact triangular. It's a triangular connection. So sometimes we can be in the thoughts and slow reasoning phase, and then we have some emotional markers related to the scenarios we imagine, and so we go back and forth between the thoughts and emotions and behavior. We need to be aware and open to challenge our beliefs about ourselves and about the world, and eventually change them. So let's take an example, a question that we commonly ask. Why do some leaders care about the well-being of others, whereas others don't? Well, maybe in the first situation, these good leaders believe that we're all part of the same human family, that we have to care about each other, and that we are responsible for any harm that we might cause to other people. Whereas some bad leaders may think that we're not connected as a human family, and they only care about their selfish interests and reaching their goals of power and wealth, and would only care about the actions in the possibility of them getting negative consequences for their wrongdoings. Let's take the example of a very popular limiting belief, which is failure is bad. So we probably have constructed this belief throughout our school years, where wherever we used to make mistakes in our exams, we were sanctioned by low grades and negative consequences. So it's no surprise that after all these years of schooling, well, people tend to fear making mistakes and avoiding making them, knowing that the best learning experiences come out of mistakes and experimentation, as well as succeeding in our entrepreneurial projects is based on our ability to learn from our mistakes. The experiences we live and our self-reflection about these experiences, as well as our learning from the experiences of others, will shape our beliefs. These beliefs will in turn define the interpretation we make of the events that happen in our lives. And these interpretations will define our reactions to these events. So failure can be interpreted as a learning opportunity. And this is exactly what Thomas Edison meant when he said, "I have not failed. I have just found 10,000 ways that won't work." A good research-based tool to assess our values and their prioritization is the Barrett self-assessment. So we explore different levels of values ranging from survival to relationship, self-esteem, transformation, internal cohesion, making a difference, service. And we see how these different values drive our decisions and behavior. The third dimension of self-awareness is about the hierarchy of human needs. The first level that human beings need to fulfill is physiological needs. Then the second level is safety needs. The third, love and belonging. The fourth, esteem. And the fifth, self-actualization. Understanding this hierarchy of needs means that we can't really expect from people who are still struggling with fulfilling the physiological and safety needs to really care about self-actualization, because they really have to solve these first challenges initially before getting involved in higher levels of needs. In fact, Maslow has never drawn it as a pyramid, but it's more some management books that chose to illustrate it as such. The fourth dimension of self-awareness is about identifying our personality traits. The most valid and reliable self-assessment to identify our personality traits is called the Big Five and has been developed by the psychologist Carl Jung. So, five personality traits forming the word ocean. The first one is openness, then conscientiousness, extraversion, agreeability, and neuroticism. Openness is about how open a person is to new ideas and experiences, and the degree of intellectual curiosity, creativity, and the preference for novelty. Conscientiousness is about how goal-oriented, persistent, and organized a person is. Agreeableness is about how much a person puts others' interests and needs ahead of their own, and a measure of one's trusting and helpful nature. Extraversion is about how much a person is energized by the outside world and the tendency to seek the company of others and talk. Neuroticism is about how sensitive a person is to stress and negative emotional triggers. You can take this self-assessment for free on turiti.com and 123test.com. In this fifth dimension of self-awareness, we will see how we can identify our talents. According to the StrengthsFinder self-assessment, which is based on the world's largest study on talents performed by the Gallup organization, well, talents are defined as naturally recurring patterns of thought, feeling, or behavior that can be productively applied. Whereas a strength is defined as the ability to consistently provide near-perfect performance in a specific activity. This study identified 34 different talents that you can find among human beings, grouped in 4 categories: executing, influencing, relationship building, and strategic thinking. So I provided you with the link here to take the StrengthsFinder assessment and identify your top 5 predominant talents, and you'll understand through the report how to leverage these talents in your personal and professional life. The sixth dimension of self-awareness is about our chronotype. The chronotype is a type of sleep pattern. So thanks to the research-based book, The Power of When by Dr. Bruce, you can identify which type of chronotype you are, whether it is wolf or lion or bear or dolphin. Lions are early risers, so they tend to feel the afternoon slump, and by the evening, they feel drained. They constitute about 15% of the population. And sleep experts recommend that lions wake up around 5:30 a.m. and go to sleep around 10:30 p.m. Wolves, also known as night owls, are late risers. So they tend to stay up later and struggle with waking up early. They also constitute about 15% of the population. And they are more productive in the later afternoon and evening. So sleep experts recommend that wolves set their alarm for 7 a.m., snooze for 30 minutes, and go to sleep by midnight. Bears follow the solar cycle. They generally feel awake during the day and need 8 hours of solid sleep at night. They constitute about 50% of the population. They are productive in the morning, and they struggle with the mid-afternoon slump. Sleep experts recommend that bears wake up around 7 a.m. and go to sleep by 11 p.m. The fourth category is dolphins. Well, this is the insomniac group. So they might be anxious and have trouble turning their brain off at night. They usually don't get a complete night's sleep. They constitute about 10% of the population. Even though they wake up tired, dolphins are most productive by the mid-morning. Sleep experts recommend that dolphins get up around 6 a.m. and try to sleep around midnight. This book is not only interesting because it helps you to identify your sleep pattern, but it also provides you with an optimal schedule, to perform all kinds of activities, from drinking your coffee, doing sports, reading, napping, etc. You can also take the Power of When quiz for free on the link above. The seventh dimension of self-awareness is about understanding our motivations. We really should take the time to reflect about our motivations to become leaders or entrepreneurs. So, what really motivates us? Some people are motivated by the drive to accumulate more power and wealth, others to acquire prestige and admiration. Our motivation could also be to achieve freedom and pleasure at work, or it can be a higher purpose to make a positive social or environmental impact. The eighth dimension of self awareness is about identifying and developing our passions. Identifying our passions requires paying attention to some special moments where we experience a high degree of pleasure and satisfaction in performing some activities. Here are two questions to help you identify your passions. The first one is, if you had as much money as you wanted, what career would you choose to pursue? And the second is, if you had enough time and money to learn anything, what would you choose to learn? By reflecting on these two questions and trying different kinds of activities and jobs, you might eventually be able to quickly identify what your passions are and leverage them in your professional career. I hope you enjoyed discovering these 8 dimensions of self-awareness, and I hope it will help you to better understand your own behavior and the behavior of others. This second module is about leadership. There are more than 100 different definitions of leadership in the research literature, but I like this one in particular because it's very concise and encompasses different types of leadership, which is the ability to move people towards a goal. So it's a process where a leader moves a group of people from point A to point B. In an organizational context, we can see it as the process of moving employees towards achieving a future vision. We can also find many different leadership constructs in the research literature. So one of the great books that enumerates these constructs is The Eighth Habit by Stephen Covey. So one of the constructs is called transactional leadership. So this kind of leadership is based on the carrot and stick, so giving rewards and punishment to push people to behave in a certain way. Another type of construct is the transformational leadership. This type of leadership is based on influencing people so that they can, by themselves, by their independent will, decide to move from this point A to point B. So what are the qualities people most look for in leaders? To answer this question, Professors Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner from the University of Santa Clara carried out the world's largest study to identify these top qualities. So they surveyed more than 2.5 million people in all continents to identify these top qualities. So could you guess what these top qualities are? The number one quality people most look for in leaders is honesty. Honesty or integrity has been defined by the authors in their book Credibility as someone who is truthful and trustworthy. The second quality is forward-looking, so leader with a future vision. The third is inspiring. The fourth, competent. And the fifth, intelligence, since leaders are expected also to be smart and be able to solve complex problems. This global study also helped identify the 5 practices of exemplary leadership. The first leadership practice is called Model the Way. It's about leading by example. The second is Inspire a shared vision. The third is Challenge the process. The fourth is Enable others to act. And the fifth is Encourage the heart. To illustrate the first practice, Model the Way, you can think of a leader who displays the behaviors which are expected from his teammates. So, for example, when he asks his teammates to come to the meetings on time, well, he shows up on time. When he asks his colleagues to share their problems or their failures, well, he's the first one to display such behavior. Inspiring a shared vision is about connecting the individual aspirations of team members to the future vision for the organization and making sure that all employees find their aspirations in this future image of these goals that the organization seeks to achieve. Challenge the process is about questioning the status quo and the current work processes. It's about identifying the hurdles that the collaborators might encounter and helping them overcome these challenges in order to achieve a better collaboration and a better performance. Enable others to act is about making sure that people have the right knowledge and skills and authorizations to perform their tasks and achieve their objectives. It's about also providing them with opportunities to get training programs, coaching, as well as support services. Encourage the Heart is about thanking and rewarding people for their efforts and achievements, and it's also about celebrating team successes. One of the most valid and reliable self assessments on leadership styles is called DISC. D stands for dominance, I for influence, S for steadiness, and C for conscientiousness. Dominant leaders' priorities are getting immediate results, taking action, challenging self and others. They're motivated by power and authority, by competition, by winning, and by success. They generally feel loss of control or being taken advantage of and showing their vulnerability. You will notice in these leaders self confidence, directedness, forcefulness, and risk taking. In terms of limitations, they generally lack of concern for others. They show impatience and insensitivity. The priorities of the influence type of leaders are expressing enthusiasm, taking action, encouraging collaboration. So they're motivated by social recognition, group activities, and friendly relationships. They generally fear social rejection or disapproval or loss of influence and being ignored. You will notice their charm, their enthusiasm, sociability, optimism, and talkativeness. But they're generally a bit impulsive, disorganized, or may lack some follow through capacities. The priorities of the steadiness type are giving support, maintaining stability, and enjoying collaboration. They are motivated by stable environments, sincere appreciation, cooperation, and opportunities to help. They generally fear the loss of stability, change, or loss of harmony, or even offending others. You will notice their patience. They are team players, they're calm, they are good listeners, and they generally show humility. They generally are over accommodating and they have a tendency to avoid change and they're a bit indecisive. The priorities of the conscientiousness type of leaders are ensuring accuracy, maintaining stability, and challenging assumptions. They are generally motivated by opportunities to use their expertise or gain knowledge, their attention to quality. They also fear sometimes criticism and slipshod methods or being wrong. So you will notice their precision, their analysis skills, the skepticism, they're sometimes reserved and quiet. They could be overly critical with a tendency to overanalyze and to isolate themselves. The D and C types of behavior are generally task oriented, so they may sacrifice social relationships for the sake of achieving the task. Whereas the I and S types are more relationships oriented, so they may sacrifice the achievement of the task for the sake of preserving the social relationships. The D and I type are very comfortable with the fast pace of change, and the C and S styles are more comfortable with the slow pace of change. You can take the DISC assessment for free on the website of tweety.com and 123test.com. How can we develop our leadership capacities effectively? To answer this question, the Center for Creative Leadership, one of the most influential institutes on executive leadership education,
and consulting and training, has produced a handbook called the Leadership Development Handbook, where he identified three main components of an effective leadership development program. The first component is challenges. So people need challenging experiences that push them outside of their comfort zone to feel the need to learn new skills. So it could be a new responsibility to lead a team, to achieving a certain task, or any kind of experiences where you can develop your capacities to influence the behavior of others. The second component is assessment. And this is the kind of self assessments that we have mentioned before that help people identify their strengths and weaknesses, where they are and where they need to be. The third component is support. And this is all the kind of encouragement as well as knowledge that we can find in books or in conferences or through coaching or advice from colleagues or from family members. And that help us get the best out of these learning experiences. In this last section, I wanted to talk very briefly about the social entrepreneurial leadership concept. I think it's a very important concept of leadership, where leaders are engaged in solving social or environmental challenges in innovative and sustainable ways. They're often also engaged in achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And these are my three recommended books on leadership. The first one is Strengths-Based Leadership by the Gallup Institute. The second is The Leadership Challenge by Professor Kouzes and Posner. And the third one is Bad Leadership by Professor Barbara Kellerman from the Harvard Business School. This third module is about creativity. So do you know the difference between creativity and innovation? There are so many definitions that you can find in books and articles, but I like these ones. So creativity can be defined as the process of generating new ideas, whereas innovation could be defined as the successful implementation of creative ideas with a real commercial potential. So let's start by a fun creativity exercise. Could you identify the object in the picture? Most people will probably only see a glass or container for liquids. Whereas it could be a magnifying glass to start a fire, a table leg, an ashtray, a vase, a tool to draw circles, a fly trap, a weight, an aquarium, a xylophone, a projectile, and imagine if the glass is broken into pieces. So an important creativity principle is called think different. So do not reduce objects to their most common uses. We need to be aware of how schooling influenced our creative capacities. So I highly recommend you to watch this TED Talk by Sir Ken Robinson entitled Do Schools Kill Creativity? It's probably the most watched TED Talk with more than 18 million views. By reading his outstanding book, Creative Schools, you will also understand why public schools were designed like factories. So how can we generate creative ideas? In his 3-minute TED Talk, Richard St. John enumerated 4 techniques to get creative ideas. So 2 of the principles identified by Richard St. John in his TED Talk were observe and listen. So he took the example of Dr. Jean Caruthers, who used to inject Botox in the eyelids of her patients until one of the patients asked her why she wouldn't inject his forehead. Because every time she injected Botox in his forehead, he had this beautiful, untroubled expression. And this is how a billions dollars industry of injecting Botox to reduce wrinkles has been created. There are also many accidental innovations that we use in our daily life. I encourage you to watch this YouTube video entitled 15 Accidental Innovations, and you will find that microwave, matches, ice cream cones, X-rays, post-it notes, and others were accidental innovations. Another way of generating creative ideas is to dare challenging fundamental ideas. Let's take the example of the school. So why are schools the way they are? I mean, why are they designed like closed buildings where you have children grouped by age groups, these kinds of rigid time structures where you have 1 hour maths, 1 hour English, etc. Why are children taught this kind of subjects in linear paths? Why are exams the way they are? So asking such fundamental questions and challenging them can help us reimagine and redesign the school of the future. Another way, again, to getting creative ideas is to broaden our scope of interest to subjects that are different from ours. So, definitely, we can get some creative ideas and innovations from one field to another, and this is a very powerful way to innovate. The late Professor Clayton Christensen from the Harvard Business School said, people who think outside the box often talk to people who play in a different box to get new ideas. We can also get creative ideas by collaborating with people from different backgrounds. In the international bestseller Originals by Adam Grant, we can find some very valuable advice to conducting effective brainstorming or brainwriting. So he said that there is some evidence that in brainstorming exercise or brainwriting exercise, your first 20 ideas are actually less creative than your next 15. And that if you want to max out on creativity, you actually need 200 ideas on the table before you hit the highest point of novelty. Let's now discover the 6 hats method by the great thinker Edward de Bono. I encourage you to watch the YouTube video by clicking on the link at the bottom of the page, where you will discover how wearing different hats while analyzing the different ideas. The white hat, which is the one concerned about facts, the red hat concerned about feelings, the blue hat about the process, the yellow hat about the benefits, the black hat about the quotients, and the green hat about creative ideas. A very popular and effective innovation technique is called design thinking. So design thinking, this term has been coined by the founders of IDEO, which is probably the most famous design firm, and who also founded the Stanford Design School. So you can watch this video on YouTube entitled The Shopping Cart Challenge. So you can click on the link at the bottom of this page and you will find this kind of small documentary on IDEO's design thinking process and how they were challenged to redesign the shopping cart in 5 days. Design thinking is a 5-step innovation process. So it starts with the first step of empathizing. In fact, it starts with forming first a multidisciplinary team, like with people who are from engineering, from sales and marketing, economists, psychologists, sociologists, etc. So you can have really different kind of inputs in your brainstorming and in your innovation process. So the first step, this team goes to immerse itself within the environment where the product or service to be reinvented takes place. And then they come back to really define the problem properly and they can seek advice from experts. Then they go in subgroups. They do some kind of ideation process through brainstorming and brainwriting, where they have certain rules, such as really allow the wildest ideas to happen first without criticizing them, and then group the best ideas to form prototypes. So it's about building quickly prototypes and then testing them. And after testing, so of course you improve a final and you make a final prototype with the best features of all the prototypes that have been developed until the final product or service is designed. I also wanted to mention a very popular and effective method for technological innovation called TRIZ. It was developed by Russian scientist Heinrich Altschuler, who used to lead the patents department of the Russian Navy. Altschuler identified 40 innovation principles based on the study of more than 50,000 international patents. Principle 1 is called segmentation. IKEA is a great example that illustrates this innovation principle. So by deciding to segment its furnitures, IKEA not only decreased its production costs and as well as its transportation costs, but also its end user prices. Principle 13, for example, is called inversion, And a great example to illustrate this is the treadmill. So, whenever we are confronted with a technological problem, we can go through all these 40 innovation principles. And by doing so, it can help us generate creative ideas to solve these problems. So, we can either use one principle or a combination of different principles. A great movie that I recommend my university students to watch that illustrates really the challenges of creativity in research is A Beautiful Mind. This movie tells the story of the great mathematician John Nash, who won the Nobel Prize for Economics. The purpose of this course was to offer you an introduction to the art and science of self awareness, leadership, and creativity. I really hope you enjoyed it. Please leave your comments and your ideas and feedback and reach out to us on humanizers.org. Thank you for taking the time to take this course.
Wow.